Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Chullin Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis. Pei Beis Amud Beis. We're going to start at the Mishnah on the bottom of Pei Beis Amud Aleph, and we're going to go to the Mishnah toward the bottom of Pei Gimel Amud Aleph. It's quite a large number of words, so Mir Tashem we'll do as well as we can. Says the Mishnah as follows: Shochat para ve'achar kach shnei vaneha sofeg shmonim. If one shechts a cow, and then one separately shechts two of its children, right? So that's also a double violation. And the Gemara says, Sofeg es harbaim. That is going to be 80 lashes. Shachta, if one shechts the animal, ve'es bita, and its daughter, ve'es bas bita. So it's 3 generations. The Gemara says, Sofeg shmonim. The first animal was mutter, and the second 2 animals, respectively, were each going to be asur. Shachta, if the animal was shechted, ve'es bas bita, so you skip a generation. The mother was shechted, then the granddaughter was shechted, ve'achar kach shochat bita, and afterwards the middle generation was shechted. This case is more nuanced, so it's generation 1, generation 3, generation 2. So the Gemara says, Sofeg es harbaim, there is malkos of 1 Isser. Very interesting, because here generation 1, generation 3, generation 2. Sumchus Omer Mishum Reb Meir, Sofeg Shmonin. So we're going to have to get into this shita, because once he shechts the middle generation, so that middle generation is really both. It's really 3 generations in a row. Sumchus views it like the previous case of doing it in order, and the Tanna Kama views it as doing it not in order. Okay, says the Gemara Amai, why is it that one would be chayiv in? Is it that one would be chayiv in also ve'espino if it's done out of order? If you do the child first and then the mother, l'chori should not be chayiv. Also ve'espino amar Rachmana v'lo beno ve'oso. So it should be in order. It should be the mother was shechted first, and only then, if you shech the next one, the child, you're going to be chayiv. However, if you did the child first and then the parent, maybe you should not have done that. Says the Gemara, lo sal kadaitach. You should not think that that's the case. Titania, we have a brisa. Also, ve'espino, we have the mother and the child. That's the order of the pasuk. Ein liela oso ve'espino. Oso ve'esimo minayin. What if the child is first and the mother is next? She'omer lo si shchatu harei kan shnayim. The pasuk is plural. Says the Gemara, haketzad. What is the case? Echad hashochet es hapara. Ve'echad hashochet es ima. Ve'echad hashochet es bena. Shnayim acharim chayavim. Whatever the case may be, the latter 2 will always be the ones that are held accountable.
What is that plus?
Lo sishchatu oso ve'es beno lo sishchatu biyom echad. That's the pasuk. They should not be. Yeah. It's a unique scenario here. I feel bad. It's a base medrash. This is true. Okay, so that's why, says the Gemara, that we don't really care about the order. The order really doesn't matter. If you do child or parent and child, one way or the other, one will have violated the Isra of Oso ve'espino, and that brings us to the top of Pei Beis Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, wait one second. The pasuk says, Lo sishchatu. You wanted to say that means if you do mother and child, or even child and mother. Says the Gemara on the top of Pei Beis Amud Beis. Hold on one second. Hi, mi boile legufei. The pasuk of Lo sishchatu is just teaching me the basic din of Oso ve'ezbeno. What? I need that already. You can't double darshan the pasuk. Says the Gemara, no. In Cain, had it been like you're saying, then lichtov, what the Torah should have said was Lo sishchot. My lo sishchatu. That's a very good deal. Oso ve'espeno lo sishchot. If it was meant to be the way you're saying, is legufe, just to teach me the din, I don't need anything more than that. Why does it say lo sishchatu? Says the Gemara, because we have something else to worry about. Ve'akati mi boile, says the Gemara, we still need the pasuk of lo sishchatu for something else. Because of Rachmana lo sishchot, if the pasuk would have said only lo sishchot, Hava Amina, I would have thought, chad in, if one person does both shchitas, yes, trey lo, But if two different people did the shchitas, if David shechts the mother and I shecht the child, maybe there is no isser. Says the Gemara, we need that pasuk of lo shchatu because otherwise I would have thought that the isser of osav espino can only be violated when one person does the double shchita. Says the Gemara, ve'afilu trei, that even two people. In Cain, says the Gemara, what should the pasuk have said? If that's what you were trying to teach, it should have said lo yishachetu. They should not be shechted. Sounding irrelevant of who does what. Says the Gemara, my lo shchatu, shema mino tarte. Says the Gemara, we can learn out multiple things. So in short, from the word lo shchatu, we learn three things. Legufe, we learn that it can be even two different shochtim, and we learn that it can be bina ain or ain bina. All of those cases are going to be a violation of the isser of osav espino, and that brings us to the two dots, which will take us up to the Mishnah on the next page. Now, if you'll recall, the last case of our Mishnah that we learned was a machlokes tanaim. The case was where the grandmother was shechted, the grandchild was shechted, and then the middle generation, the mother was shechted. The Tanakama was of the opinion of Sofeg es Harbaim, you only violated one lot. However, according to Sumchis, you were Sofeg es Harbaim. You were Sofeg Shmonim. So now we need to understand this shita. Shachta be'es bas bita v'chulei. That was the case of the Mishnah. So it says the Gemara as follows. Amar le Abai le Rav Yosef. My time of the Sumchas. I don't understand. Why did Sumchas hold that there was double malchus? Do we say kasavar Sumchas that achal shnei zeisei chele behelam echad chayiv shtei chatos? Do we say that if a person were to eat in one sitting two zeisei chalav, if that's what was going to happen, they'd be double chayiv. Ubedin hu delishma'in be'alma, and really this is a regular din. V'hai de kamash malon v'ha lehodiach hakocha de rabbanon. And really the chiddush of our Mishnah, is that the rabbanon held 40. Because really, if you eat a double in one, let's say I'm sitting in one sitting and I eat a double chaylev. So I should have been chayiv shmonim. Our Mishnah is mechadesh that the rabbanon only hold your sofeg is harbaim. Afal pi that you did a double isser. You can go to the main base medrash. Yeah.
Knowing which real estate is viewed. Nothing like knowing which real estate's viewed.
It's no lack of love, I promise you, Rabbi Phil. So says the Gemara, the whole chiddush of the Gemara is, of course, we always hold that if you're ochal shnei zeisei chele behelamecha, that you're chayiv shtei chatos. What's the chiddush of our Mishnah? That the Rabbanon hold that you only have 40. You only have one set of malchus. Afal gav, the guf and muchlakin, even though we're talking about different animals. You did the grandmother, you did the grandchild, and you did the mother. It doesn't matter. Even though they're guf and muchlakin, patri Rabbanon. So do we say that Sumchas is of the opinion that achal shnei zeisei chele behelam echad is chayiv shtei chatos, and of course the same is true in here in the chiddush of our Mishnah is the Rabbanon. Odilma, and we're about 12 lines down on Pei Beis, Amud Beis. Odilma kasavar Sumchas something different. That really achal shnei zeisei chele behelam echad eino chayiv ala achas. Really, that case of chaylev is arbaim. But v'hacha hainu taima hol v'guf and muchlaken. Really, the rule. Which one's the rule? Which one's the exception? Right? Do we say that the chaylev is the rule, and it should therefore be achal shtei zeisim in one helam echad yerchayev shmonim, and the exceptions are rabbanon? Or do we say really the rule is that when you eat them behelam echad, you're really only chayev one? In our case, in the Mishnah of the grandmother, grandchild middle is the case that's mechudash. So which one is it? So Amar Le'in, it's like the first version that you said, and this is answer number 1 of 3. Kasavar achal shnei zeisei chel b'halam echad chayiv shtei chatos. So that's the Gemara's first approach. That we assume that Sumchus is of the opinion that really be'etzem, we fundamentally hold that a person who ate in one sitting 2 zeisei chelev, they are going to be chayiv for a double malchus. They'll be sofeg shmonim, and really that's the basic din of our Mishnah. So the sheet of Sumchus is not a chiddush in our Mishnah at all, but the Rabbanon is a chiddush. Says the Gemara Mimai. How do you know that Sumchus holds this way? That in general, if a person is ochel shnei zeisim behalamecha, that they're going to be chayiv shtei chatos. Midat Tanya, that's what it should say over here. What does it say? Hazoreya Kiloim. Weird language. We'll have to figure this piece out. The Gemara is going to discuss this. A person who plants kiloim loke, he gets lashes. What kind of lashes does he get? Arboim? Does he get shmonim? What does kiloim mean? This little brisa is like Omer Dorsheni, the whole thing. What does that even mean? So my loka asks the Gemara, Ilema loka achas. If you want to say that he's going to get one set of malkos, I don't need a new Mishnah for that. Pshita. Obviously, you get a set of malkos, you planted kiloim. Ve'od, another thing that's difficult to understand about this brisa is my kiloim. Ella, it must be that pshita beis malkios, that if a person plants kiloim, they get shtei malkios. So b'mayaskinon. If you want to say that they were done sequentially and not simultaneously, at 2:01 p.m. I put in the first kiloim. At 2:10 p.m. I did the second kiloim. So if that's true, and it was ubishtei hasros, Bill, if you plant this, you'll be chayav malkos. I'm like, I know, and I drop in from my hand barley and wheat and chartzonim, grape seeds. So then I'm going to be chayav two separate. That's tanina that we have already. Nazir shahir shose yain kol hayom eno chayav elachas. If you have a nazir with one hasra and he drank a bottle of wine, he sipped the whole day. Of course, that's going to be one. However, amrulo al tishte v'hu shose al tishte again later v'hu shose chayav al kol achas v'achas. It can't be, says the Gemara, that the double planting of the kiloim was bezeh achar zeh, because that is so obvious from the world of Nazir, as we saw Zamar Makom as precedent. It's so obvious that you'll be chayev shtei malkios in such a case. Ela pshita, it must be that when we were talking about the kiloim case, it was bevas achas uvehasra achas. It must be, says the Gemara, that we're talking about a case where you planted the kiloim at the same time and you only had one hasra and money. Who would that shita be like in regards to the kilaim, comparing back to our case? If you want to say it's like the Rabbanon from our Mishnah that we started with today on Pei Beis Amud Aleph, who holds that if you shecht the grandmother, and then you skip a generation, shecht the grandchild, and then you go back a generation and shecht the mother, Sumchus in our Mishnah said you get 80 lashes, double malkos. So if you want to say it's the Rabbanan in our Mishnah who say that you're only chayav 40, hashta umahasam the gufin muchlakin patre Rabbanan hachalo kol shekain. There in our Mishnah, what did the Rabbanan say? You shech the grandmother, you shech the grandchild, and then you shech the middle. What did they say? There, it's gufin muchlakin. They're completely different bodies. If over there they're going to say that it's only sofegas harbayim, obviously over here, where it's not gufin muchlakin, by the planting of the kilim, obviously that's going to be the case, that you're going to be sofegas harbaim. Elalav, it must be that it is sumchas. And what then would sumchas say? So says the Gemara, Rashi, Elalav sumchasi de lo ashkechan tana de isle hai svara elahu. It must be that he's the one who says 80. So therefore, this is our source. We asked a third of the way down, mimai. From where do we know that Sumchas holds this way? How do we know that really Sumchas is the standard and the exception is the Rabbanon? So now we have our answer from the case of Kiloim. Says the Gemara, lo? No, I could reinterpret that for you, that it's not like Sumchas. Really, la'olam Rabbanon. Really, the case of Kiloim loke is like the case of the sheet of the Rabbanon. Umilsav agav urche kamashmalon. And we're learning a side point here. De'ika trei gavne kiloim. There's two types of kiloim, of kiloi hakerim, of planting things you shouldn't plant. Ule'afuke mi the Rabbi Yoshia, who says as follows: the Amar Rabbi Yoshia, ad sheyizra chita useor v'chartzan b'mapolas yad. If you don't plant wheat, barley, and grapeseed in one throw of the hand. That was his shita of what, it's a very limited shita. It's very difficult to violate. You'd have to really want to violate the isser of kilayim if that's the standard. It's such a high standard. Kamash malan dechizara chita v'chartzan, and says the Gemara that we don't hold like Rabbi Yoshia. What do we see the milsav agav orche from the Rabbanon, that if you were to plant zerach kamashman dechizara chita v'chartzan, if you only planted two, or useor v'chartzan nami mechayv. That's what kilayim meant, and the whole thing is like the Rabbanon. So therefore, we don't have a good source for sumchus, because the source we tried to bring for sumchus, which was kilayim loket, could even be explained according to the Rabbanon. Therefore, tashma, 2/3 of the way down, maybe a drop more, trying to find a good source for the shita of sumchus who holds in our Mishnah that they're sofeg shmonim. Let's just get the case super clear. The last case of our Mishnah on Pei Beis Amud Aleph indicated that if a grandmother was shechted in the cow, I should, if anybody's hearing me out of context, it sounds weird. If the grandmother was shechted, if the grandmother cow was shechted, and then the grandchild cow was shechted, and then the mother cow was shechted. So it's generation 1, generation 3, generation 2 of the cows. It says the shita of sumchas are sofeg shmonim. So where do we know this shita from? What are the mari mekomos that support his shita? So tashma, ochal mizeh kezayis umizeh kezayis sofeg shmonim. If one were to eat the gid hanoshe from 2 different locations, so then they're going to be sofeg shmonim. Now that means if you ate from the right leg and you ate from the left leg, a kezayis in each, says the Tanakama, you're sofeg shmonim. Why? Obvious. You ate 2 kezayisim of gid hanoshe. It's a pashut that's not allowed. Look what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Rabbi Yehuda Omer eno sofeg ela mem. What a unique shita. How could you only be sofeg mem? You ate 2 kezayisim. So says the Gemara, what exactly is the case over here? If you want to say that really the 2 kezayisim of the gid hanasha that you ate were eaten sequentially, one at 2:01 and one at 2:10, like the recommendations before, uvishtei hasraos, and you had separate hasraos, then why in the world would Rabbi Yehuda say you're only sofeg arba'in? My time with Rabbi Yehuda. If in fact you ate them in sequence, just like the case of Nazir, al tishte v'shose, al tishte v'shose. We said over there, you're chayvstein. Why over here do we say that you're only sofeg asarbaim if it's zeh? Says the Gemara, because we learned something very unique about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Hasra'as safeki. Really, there's a hasra'as safek. This is an unbelievable thing. Why is it hasra'as safek? Because he holds that only one leg has the din of gid hanasha. The sciatic nerve, which runs down the back of both legs, he holds this way. You can see this as a hint in Tosfos, the bottom Tosfos, my time of the Yehuda hasra'as safek. Says the Gemara, v'im tomar, v'hamasikna beperish gid hanasha, demifshat pshita leil Rabbi Yehuda dishel yamin. So we see that he holds that it's hasra safek, because I don't know which piece you're eating. I'm just telling you hasra. Gerald, if you eat gid hanoshe, you're going to be chayiv. So he says, shakol niya bidvaro, and he eats a kazai. I don't know what leg you're talking about. I don't know what my hasra is going on. So that means it's hasra safek. And therefore, b'shamin le'Rabbi Yehuda, that the Amar hasra safek, lo shma hasra.
Why does he get 4?
Why should he get 0?
That's what I meant.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be that he said, I'm eating from the right one. No, because then what's the second one? It's not even funny. It could be the question of, no, what is, because Rabbi Yehuda does hold eno sofeg ela mem. Yeah. Let's see if we can figure it out in the sugya a little bit later, because we're not done talking about it. So says the Gemara, "V'shamin Rabbi Yehuda amar hasra safek lo shma hasra." That's not considered hasra, and when you lack hasra, you can't have malkos. That's just basic rules from Maseches Makos. Where do we see this? So we see this in the following case. This is not a good idea. Don't try this at home. A woman got divorced and got married before the 3-month period of hukra ubra. We have a general restriction that if a woman gets divorced, she's not allowed to get married for 3 months, because we want to know if she's pregnant from the old husband, if If she is, we want to know about that now. And by the 3-month mark, we assume that a woman will be showing of Hukra Ubra. So it says the Gemara, what if a woman broke that rule? And then she had a baby at the 7th month. So now we have a problem. We don't know if the father was the old husband before they got divorced, because she got divorced on a Monday and married on a Thursday. She got divorced on a Monday. This is not a good scenario. Anyway, she gets married and she's cohabited with both people. So we don't know. And then look at this. Hika es zeh v'chazar v'hika zeh. The child hits the first husband and the second husband, either of which could be his father. We know one of them is. We just don't know which one. Or kilel as zeh v'chazar v'kilel as zeh. Or he cursed father number 1 or father number 2. I should say husband, ex-husband and current husband. O shehika shneim bevas achas. Or if he stands there and somehow punches them both in the face at exactly the same time. O shekil shneim bevas achas. Tanakama holds chayiv. Most you must, right? Yehuda Omer bevas achas chayiv. Bezachar zeh potter. So what do we see over here? We see the same exact idea, that bezeh achar zeh, it's very, very difficult for Rabbi Yehuda to say that you're really chayiv. Why? Because I don't know which father it is. What I do know is that when you do hit both of them at the same time, or you're makalal both of them at the same time, that you're going to be chayiv. El pshita, it must therefore be obvious that when we are talking about the Gid HaNoshe, that it's pshita b'vas achas uv'hasra achas. This is the answer to your question. It has to be that it was done both at the same time with one hasra. That's why Rabbi Yehuda holds. It can't be the case of b'zachar zeh, because the havamin of b'zachar zeh implies that Rabbi Yehuda somehow would still be sofeg es harbayim, but you shouldn't be chayiv anything if in fact you say asra safek lo shma asra, like David asked. Okay, uman tanakama. Who's the sheet of the tanakama that you're going to be chayiv? If you want to say that really it's like the sheet of sumchas, hashta uma hasam de gufen muchlaken patre rabbanon. In the Mishnah where we dealt with the grandmother cow, followed by the grandchild cow, followed by the middle generation cow, there it's gufen muchlaken, and he said you're chayiv arbaim. Obviously, over here, it's going to be exactly the same thing. Elolav, it must be Sumchasu, who says that you're going to be Chayiv Shmonim. That was what we saw above. So therefore, if you look up at the brisa that we started with for answer number 2, we said Tashma, that when you eat Gid HaNasha, Mizeh umizeh, and your sofig is harbaim, it can't be the Rabbanon, it might be Sumchas. Now this is answer number 2. We have Amar Makom. Sumchas has precedence that he holds that your sofig is shmonim, sofig shmonim. Says the Gemara, lo, not true. Lo olam, really the case of Gid HaNashe was bezeh achar zeh. You ate them sequentially. And the Rabbanon, and it's a sheet of the Rabbanon. The high Tana, savar ke'idach Tana the Rabbi Yehuda, but this almost feels like a cop-out, but it's not, because there's a fundamental machlokes tanaim within Shitas Rabbi Yehuda that holds the Amar Asra Safek is in fact Shmo Hasra. So this is just good Shas Yediyas. We don't know if Safek Hasra, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is considered to be a valid form of Hasra. The only way to understand the case of Gid HaNoshe in version number 1, if you hold that Safek Hasra is Lo Shmo Hasra, is the way that we initially understood it, which is according to Sumchas. But says the Gemara, I could explain it another way according to the Rabbanon if you hold like version 2 of Rabbi Yehuda, that Safek Hasra is Shma Hasra. How do we know that there's a shita like this, Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that Safek Hasra is Shma Safek? Says the Gemara, Detanya, 2 lines from the bottom of Pei Beis and Beis. Detanya, the pasuk says by the Isra of Nosar, Lo sosiru mimenu ad boker. You should not leave it over till morning. That sounds like a lav. Ve'hanosar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrofu. But if you do leave it over, then guess what? You have a way to solve your problem. Ba'esh tisrofu. What type of Isra is this called? This is a lav hanitak le'aseh. It's like Geneva. Don't steal. But if you steal, don't leave the food over. But if you leave the food over, that in the morning you should burn it. So says the Gemara, Boha Kasuv, top of Pei Gimel Amid Aleph, heading down to the Mishnah closest to the bottom. Boha Kasuv litain asay achar losa asay. Lomar she'ein lokin alav divrei Reb Yehuda. It must be, says the Gemara, that we're dealing with a lav hanitak le'asay. And what type of hasra do you have in a lav hanitak le'asay? If the lav is a lav hanitak le'asay, so it must be that there's a safek hasra in such a case. So says the Gemara that there is no malkos in that case. Doesn't this prove the exact opposite? My time with the review safek. So why would he say it's an asay dochelos asay, but under regular circumstances he says lomar she'ein loken bakasav litain asay. Rashi says taima deba kasuv halav hachi lucky afal gav da asra safeki to call emas to asrube matzi amar akati lil yehu. Oh yes, of course, yeah, obviously. So if I warn you at night, don't leave over nosar, I have no idea if you're going to do anything wrong. That's the safek, that's the hasra safek. And without the lav anitak la'aseh, we would have said that you're chayiv. Okay, good. And says the Gemara on the top of Pei Gimel, Aleph Rabbi Yaakov Amar Omer Lo min Hashem Huzed. This is not correct. Ela mishum dehavle lav she'ein bo ma'isa. You're right that there's no malchus Rabbi Yehuda, but not because of you. How does nosar happen? By you doing nothing. You just don't eat it, and it sits there. You didn't eat it, you didn't consume it, you didn't do anything with it. So because it's a lav she'ein bo, I said lo min Hashem Huzed. It's not about a lav hanitak le'aseh or the case of litin aseh achar lo saseh, whatever the language of the Gemara is, but rather it's because of the fact, which is that it's a lav shein bo ma'isa. V'chol lav shein bo ma'isa ein lokin alav. Very good. Next, we don't have an answer yet, and if you go back one amud to the 2 dots 8 lines down, we're still waiting for Rav Yosef to answer the question, because Abaye, 4th century Amora, asked his Rebbe, Rav Yosef, hey, I don't understand the sheet of Sumchas. How did we get to 80? We tried answer number 1 that was talking about eating behelamachas. We tried answer number 2 that was talking about gid anosha. So let's try answer number 3. Tashma, we have a brisa. Achal shnei gidin, if you eat 2 sciatic nerves, mishtei yerechos, mishtei behemos, from 2 legs of 2 animals, sofeg shmonim, then you're going to be absorbing 80 lashes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eino Sofeg Elamem. This is our machlokas. If you eat 2 gidim from 2 different legs, 1 from each animal, so machlokas, the Tanna Kama holds 80, and Rabbi Yehuda holds 40. Hey chidami, ilema bezachar ze uvishte hasraos. If you want to say that the 2 achilas were separated, and there was a hasra, Phil, don't eat this, and I ate it. Phil, don't eat that, and I ate it. So then my time of Rabbi Yehuda Damar Arbaim V'sulo. Why would you say 40? If I violate the same Isser twice with Hasra, I should be chayiv a lot. Elopshita b'vasachas uv'chada Hasra. Rather, it must be that we're talking about a case where it was eaten all at the same time. And the reason why Rabbi Yehuda, in this case of Achal Shnei Gidin Mishtei Rechos Mishtei Behemos is 40, is because you did the double Achila with only 1 Hasra warning you. Fine. Says the Gemara, Man Tanakama. Who is the opinion of the Tanakama that we hold 80? Same argument as the previous 2 cases. If you want to say that we're talking about the Rabbanon in our Mishnah, that won't work, because Umah Hasam, in regards to our Mishnah, the last case of our Mishnah, the case we've been studying, of 3 generations shechted in the order of 1, 3, 2, there, the gufin muchlachin patre rabbanan. Then over here, hacha, when you're eating the 2 sciatic nerves in 1 dish, lo kol shekain, hacha lo kol shekain. Of course, they're going to say the same halacha that they said in our Mishnah, which is 40. If you say it by gufin muchlachin, for sure, you're going to say it here. Elalav sumchasi. So this is our 3rd attempt, Rav Yosef's 3rd answer to Abaye, which would try and indicate where we see precedence for the shita of sumchas, that in our Mishnah, where we see that generation 1 was shechted, followed by generation 3, followed by generation 2, how do we know that it's going to be sofeg as hashmonim? That must be this case right here of the gid anosha. Says the Gemara, the second of the wide lines, a quarter of the way down. The Olam, I disagree. The Olam b'zachar zeh. Really, we're talking about where they were eaten sequentially. What about the fact that you were worried about Rabbi Yehuda Shita? Udeka amres, my time with Rabbi Yehuda, that you're only going to be chayiv in 40. If you ate them b'zachar zeh, and you had asra by each of them, why would you be chayiv 40? That makes no sense. So says the Gemara, Kagon de les beikzayis. This is a fascinating machlokas in the Gemara here. There is a machlokas. If you eat a gid hanoshe and the volume of food that you ate is less than a kazayis, machlokas tanayin if you're chayiv. How could you possibly be chayiv if you've eaten less than a shiur? So the Rishonim here write that. And Rashi here points this out, Dibra Maschel de lesbe kazayis, bekama o bebasra, either in the first or second one that you ate, ele bechad minayu, only one of them. The Tanakama mechayiv de kasavar beryahu, uberya ein sricha shiur. That's so odd that they hold that a berya is even a gid hanashe. So let's learn the brisa, end of the second of the wide lines here, the Tanya. Achlo, if you ate the gid hanoshe ve'ein bo kizayis, you're going to be chayev. That's a beria. That's why we are saying that you are going to be chayev shmona. But Rabbi Yehuda omer ad bo kizayis. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if it was b'zachar zeh, even with asra, he doesn't hold that the gid hanoshe is a beria. And because the gid hanoshe is not a beria, even if you ate them b'zachar zeh, you are only going to be chayev arba'in. Lemaisa, when we talk in learning in halacha, we look at a beria of something like an ant. An ant is a beria. A whole bug is a beria. If you were to eat a crushed up bug, that's not a beria anymore. It's ruined. And that's why there are certain foods that were mekalon that goyim prepare. Now, a yid is not allowed to be mevatel nisr lechatchila, but if a goy were to, let's say in theory, blend up a food, and he didn't know that, but there was a bug in there, and then we got that, so then we're allowed to eat that. And technically, because it's batel b'shishim many times over. But a beria is not batel. If there's an ant in the chullin, you're not allowed to eat it. You have to look at every last thing you put in your mouth, because a beria is usher. So that's how we hold lemaisa. But clearly, there's a shita here, the Tanakama, in this brisa on the third wide line, where it says achlo be'ein bo kazayis chayev, and that's because he holds that the gid hanoshe is a beria. Good. Let's move on to the next Mishnah, the last Mishnah we're going to learn for today, and the last piece of Gemara. We'll get until about 10 lines from the bottom, and then we will call it for the day. Be'arba prakim b'shana, 4 times a year, hamocher behema lechavero, if I sell an animal, tzarech lehodio, I need to announce, ima macharti lishchot, I just sold the mother, or bita macharti lishchot, or I just sold the daughter. This is amazing. We don't, in general, need to know. Let's say random times of the year. The guy selling the animals does not need to announce, I sold the mother or I sold the child. Only 4 times a year. This is not some ironclad rule that you need to always announce. It's only true 4 times a year, which is why we probably never hear about it. Why? What are those 4 times? So it says the Gemara as follows: Ve'eluhein, Mishnah. Erev Yom Tov Ha'acharon Shel Chag, so the second days of Sukkot, aka Shmini Atzeres, which is a Chag bifnei atzma, Kasha Alai Predaschem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the end of all the Yomim Noraim, we have a different Chag, a poorly understood area of halacha, which is why we say a Shechianu on Shmini Atzeres, because it is a separate Chag. That is holiday number 1, where when a mocher is selling animals, he has to announce if he sold the mother or if he sold the child, so that the second purchaser won't shech the animal that day. Because if he does, then he violates Osova Espino, which is the whole parak that we're talking about. Time slot number 2, the Erev Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach, the eve of Pesach. Number 3, the Erev Atzeres, before Shavuos. And number 4, the Erev Rosh Hashanah. Why not Shabbos? Why not Erev Yom Kippur? Why not 100 days out of the year when we have all of these chagim? So, okay, we have an exception where Yom Kippur is also included. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Masai. When is this true that you have to announce it? That's only true bisman she'ein lo revach, when there isn't a day between where you are in the holiday, because if I sell this to you, the last minute Jews, if they go to the market the morning that Pesach is going to start, guess what they're going to do with that animal? They're going to shecht it. So therefore, by definition, the mocher behema knows that two animals will be shechted at the same time. So what does he say? I need to tell you, I know you're shopping this morning. I sold the mother an hour ago, and this is the son. So, but however, that's only if there's ein lo revach. About yesh lo revach, if there is time, ein tzarech lehodio. Then we don't have to worry. It's very interesting because it's still very possible that Osav Espino will happen. Our question is, what is the threshold of responsibility of the Mocher Behema to announce what he sold? I had made a quip a couple of days ago that maybe there's a QR code on the little ear pierce and you scan it. When was the mother shechted? No, that is not the burden in halacha. The burden in halacha is simply on these four moments. Otherwise, you can sell them without announcing when the mother or child had been sold. Umo de Reb Yehuda, even Reb Yehuda, who says that I don't require you to do this when there's a day between. However, he does agree, b'mocher es ha'em lechasan, v'es habas lekala shetzarech lehodio, b'yadua sheshem shochtim b'yom echad. How do you plan for a wedding? You make the food as close to the wedding as you can. So let's say I bought a cow a week before just to keep it in the pen for the wedding that's coming up. The chassan side of the family, this is like flops of old. You got the chassan buying a cow, you got the Kalas family buying whatever, a sheep, whatever the case may be. Both of them shechted it on the same day. So if you're selling to a chassan and a kala, really to broaden it, anyone who's getting married on the same day, right? Then we should have the same exact halacha. Good. Next part of the Mishnah. Be'arba prakim elu, at these 4 times a year, if I paid the shochet for a piece of meat in advance, then mashchitin es hatabach bal korcho. We force the tabach, the shochet, the butcher, to cut a piece of meat, even though all I ordered was a couple of ribs. And now you have to shech the whole cow and do malicha, and all this meat is going to potentially go to waste. The halacha is afilu shor shave elef dinarim ve'ein lo lokech elo dinar kofen osol lishchot. I already paid for it. I have some element of a kinyan in this animal. I have yontif coming up. You need to shech the animal. I am going to be cutting into a new animal. What am I supposed to do? I have yontif coming, and I paid, so you got to give it to me. Lefichach, because there is a degree of ownership of the mocher, of the lokeach, because I already paid for my portion, imes mes lokeach, that also means that if the animal dies, I lose out on that portion, right? You can't have it both ways. It has to be that if I purchased, then there's an element of ownership there. So if I purchase and it forces your hand as a tabach to cut and give me that piece, even if you're going to ruin other parts of the animal because you won't sell them, fine. But if the animal dies, I lose out, But when it comes to the rest of the year, and I had paid cash, the rule is not the same. There, the tabach is not obligated to cut into a very expensive animal. You only have 1% of the animal, 5% of the animal. There, he's not obligated to do that, which means that really the tabach still owns the animal, and therefore then the losses go to the mocher. If the animal dies, so then the halacha is that the tabach takes the loss. Okay, Mishnah. The Gemara opens over here with a brisa, not Mishnah, excuse me. Tana, we have a brisa. This is a Gemara from Bechoros. Im lo hodio holech v'shochet ve'eno nimna. If nobody tells you anything about whether this animal is oso ve'espino, you're good to go. Scot-free. You can go shecht away. What about the din of Amar Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah of Amasai, that he gave this caveat that when do we say it's going to be asur? That's only true if there's no time. There isn't a day of time between now and the time that one of those 4 chagim happen. But if there is an extra day, then we don't have to assume that the person who purchased the mother and the person who purchased the child are going to be shechted on the same day. Says the Gemara, that's all fine and good, but lama li lemisni, why do I have to learn the case of es ha'im lechasan ves habas lekala? Who cares? Says the Gemara, Milsa agavorche kamashmal, on the second one today, there is something unique that needs to be learned here, and what is that? The orach ara lemitrach bechasna tfei mi beis kalasa. The man's side has to work harder than the kala's side. Okay, said it. Let's continue. Says the Gemara, Ba'arba prakim elu. We spoke about the 4 prakim. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. V'halo mashach. We gave the case in the Mishnah. The Rishonim explained the case in the Mishnah is that we can obligate the tabach. You only gave over cash. There was no mashicha. That's not a kinyan. We need mashicha. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Kshemasha. Okay, so I said there was mashicha. The Mishnah didn't articulate it, but there was mashicha. Yachi, if that's true, then Ema Seifa, Val B'Shari Mos Hashana Eino Ken L'Fi Chachim Meis L'Mocher, V'Ha Mashach. If that's true, then how can at the end of the Mishnah you say that the tabach is going to be burdened? How can you say that? How can the tabach be burdened? There was mashicha. I, as the lokech, own it. Says the Gemara, you're 100% right. Amar Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak le'olam shelo mashach. Really, the case is that I did not do mashicha. Ukegon shezika lo al yadei acher. There was a schus that was done for me by somebody else. Be'arba prokim elu, at these 4 times of the year, these 4 holidays, this schus hulo, when it's to my benefit. Therefore, zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. I didn't do mashicha. It was done through another halachic mechanism of zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. So if you want to be mezakeh an animal to me during those 4 periods of time, you're right, it's mine. No mashicha, but it works. But when it's to the detriment of me, that's not how I want to run things. So that's a reasonable answer. Rabbi Lazar Amar Rabbi Yochanan says something different. Really, they fall back on a fundamental din Torah that even without Mashiach, the kinyan is valid. Mida Oraisa cash works, even without Mashiach. The Amar of Yochanan, Davar Torah, Mos Konos. Really, money works. Fine. But then why is it that we said that we need Mashiach? Because that was Gzeira. That was because of a Gzeira of Shema Yomar Lo. This is something we've seen in the Gemara a number of times. We're concerned that someone might not take responsibility for your product, and that's why the Mashiach makes it more of a kinyan. And because I've done some Mashiach, so now I have a little bit more ownership. We'll stop right here. We're not going to have shiur again until Shabbos. Tomorrow night is already Tisha B'Av. The next night is the end of Tisha B'Av, and then it's Friday. So what we're going to do is pick up on Shabbos with the appropriate blot, and I'll send out a message on our WhatsApp group as to exactly where to start. We'll stop right here at the Mishnah at the bottom of Pei Gimel Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.